So the term mini lesson can be a little intimidating. Most likely you've never actually had to create one before, but they're really helpful on the critique form. So we're going to discuss the steps necessary to creating a mini lesson. By the end of this, you should have full confidence that you can do it yourself. So why do you need a mini lesson? Well, first of all, it alleviates confusion. Sometimes we tell students how to fix things, but it confuses them. They don't know why we have to do that. Secondly, it increases understanding in them. They have a really good idea of how to fix it now, rather than just the fact that they need to fix it. It also makes them responsible for their own learning. If you teach them a lesson on how to fix something and then challenge them to fix it themselves, instead of prescriptively telling them, just do this, do this, do this, then they're more likely to retain it and to transfer it to future assignments. Also, if nothing else, by the end of your lesson, they're going to have at least one thing that they know really well from your critique. Instead of just sort of having an idea about a bunch of issues that you've addressed, there's going to be at least one lesson that you've taught them that they can carry over into future assignments. There are other benefits for you as well. First of all, it makes you learn something. During your tenure at the Writing Center, I think that you will find that there are a lot of things you don't know, and that's okay. But creating mini lessons helps you understand that. It forces you to learn why things are a problem. I can't tell you how many times writing consultants aren't sure why something's an issue. It's just something they've always done. But if you have to create a lesson on it, you're more likely to investigate why it's a problem and the different ways you can address it. Also, it hones your teaching skills. Most people who come into the Writing Center have never had to create a lesson before, and this is an opportunity to have that experience. Lastly, it really translates well to your face-to-face appointments. Most likely, you've never had to look up some of the issues you address in face-to-face appointments before. You just kind of said, well, this is how we do it. But if you have to do it for a mini lesson, then chances are when you're in an appointment, it'll translate and you can just remember the things you said and explain it to them. So how do you create a mini lesson? It's a 5-step process. And it's not that hard, I promise. We're just going to take it step by step. Step 1, describe what the issue is. Step 2, explain why it's an issue. Step 3, suggest ways to address the issue. Step 4, give examples of ways to address that issue. And step 5, give the student an opportunity to fix it. So we're going to go into each of these steps in detail with examples so that you can see how to do it for yourself. So step 1, describe what the issue is. In order to describe what the issue is, you might want to answer the following questions. Maybe, what's wrong with their paper? What is this issue? What's the proper term for this issue? Do you even know what that is? You might want to look it up. What's the definition of term? Because most likely, the student doesn't know it. What are the definitions of other terms that the student might not be familiar with? What if they don't know what a participle is? What if they don't know the difference between an adjective or an adverb? These definitions can really add to their understanding. Let's take a look, for instance, if we were addressing non-essential clauses. We could describe the issue. I noticed that you often use non-essential clauses in your sentences without offsetting with commas. That's the issue. However, there's a term that they're not familiar with, the non-essential clauses, or at least they may not be familiar with it. So we add a definition. I chose to add it in parentheses. You can add it any way you want. My definition was clauses that add to the meaning of a sentence, but that the rest of the sentence would still make sense without. This may not be the most accurate of definitions, but it helps them to understand how it works. So your goal here is to say, this is wrong with your paper, and here is what it is. Step 2, explain why this is an issue. So what does it affect? What's the problem? Does it affect style? Does it affect the tone of the paper? Does it not sound academic? Does it affect how clear the meaning is? Does it affect how smoothly it's organized or how effective their argument is? For instance, with non-essential clauses, I would say because non-essential clauses are not essential for the sentence to make sense. They need to be set apart from the sentence with commas. This makes it clear that you are simply adding to the meaning of the sentence. I use because to let them know that I'm explaining why. And then I let them know the issue that it's really affecting, clarity, by using the word clear. Step 3. Suggest ways to address the issue. You can use so many different ways to suggest this. You can give rules to follow every time. You can give them markers for the issue. How can they find it themselves? And you can give them different ways to fix it. There are often more than one way to fix it. For instance, with non-essential clauses, let's say we chose to give them some rules to follow. So the first rule is, if they occur at the beginning of the sentence, then the comma only needs to come after the phrase. If they occur in mid-sentence, however, they need to be set apart with commas on each side. And non-essential clauses that appear at the end of a sentence need commas in front of them, indicating that they are non-essential. What I've done here is create rules. Every time they identify a non-essential clause now, all they have to do is look for what part of the sentence they're in to know where the comma needs to go. Step 4. Give examples of ways to address the issue. There are 3 different ways you can do this. First of all, you could give examples from the student's paper so that they can see exactly how it fits into what they've said. For instance, on page 3 you state, even though the patient cannot respond, there is a patient narrative, a story, which can provide a glimpse into who the patient is. Notice that a story is correct, but they have an introductory clause in there that they don't have a comma with. So I point that out. Notice that the phrase, even though the patient cannot respond, sets the stage for the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence would still make sense without it, however. Thus, it needs to be set apart from the rest of the sentence with a comma for clarity. Even though the patient cannot respond, comma, there is a patient narrative. If you don't want to use an example from a student paper, you could always give examples that you have made up yourself. Take the following sentence. I was at work yesterday, comma, looking through old records. Then I tell them, notice how the phrase looking through old records adds to the meaning of the sentence. However, the rest of the sentence still makes sense without it. This is why it is set apart with a comma. Lastly, if you can't come up with anything and you don't want to use examples, you can always give examples from the lesson itself, structure it in a way to where it's a grammar lesson in itself. For instance, with non-essential clauses, I took the rules that I used and then I structured them in a way that reflected the lesson. If they occur at the beginning of the sentence, then the comma only needs to come after the phrase, as in this sentence, because I've structured that first sentence in a way where it has an introductory clause. Secondly, if they occur in mid-sentence, however, they need to be set apart with commas on each side, as with however in this sentence. Lastly, non-essential clauses that appear at the end of a sentence need commas in front of them, indicating that they are non-essential, as in this sentence. Notice that each of these sentences is structured in a way that reflects the rule that they are giving. Step 5, the most important step. Give the student an opportunity to fix it. How can they find this in their paper? You could either describe what to look for and then challenge them to find them themselves, or you could be nice and you could highlight all of them for them. It really depends on the issue and how well you think the student could identify them this time around. For instance, with non-essential clauses, at the end I could put, I have highlighted non-essential clauses without appropriate commas in your paper in yellow. I suggest decide which of the above they are and adding commas appropriately. So here is a finished product. Notice that it has my description, it has an explanation of why, it has my proper definitions, it has some rules that they can follow, it has examples they can use, and then a challenge to fix it themselves. If you follow this formula for each mini lesson, then it won't be hard to create them, and it definitely will help your OWLs.